Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well and happy Friday. So before we get started, let's take just a quick look at our checklist for week 11, and we'll take a peek at week 12 so we have a clear sense of what's coming up. So Monday, we took the reading quiz, the synthesis quiz, right? Starting to form connections between Varger and Ehrenreich, which prepared us for our rough draft. And so peer review, right? You finished that by today. And now we are working on some workshops for Essay 3. So to help make those essays as strong as possible, since again, the grades for Essay 3 and Essay 4 are in most cases going to constitute your essay portion of the overall course grade, right? And so looking ahead, so for Monday, the reverse outline will be due by the end of the day. And so the reverse outline builds on the work we did with the peer review. So really breaking down the process of progression so that we can structure our essays so that we move them into the B range or higher in the structural coherence category of our grading criteria. Okay, and then we'll continue to workshop a little bit, and then we'll shift to our 7th reading. I can't believe that already. And once we do that, as we'll see if we come back out here to our week 12 checklist, that will put us, excuse me, officially into Unit 4, where we're going to focus on understanding the text as a whole. So taking all of the skills we focused so far on in each of the units and pulling them together. And on week 12, we'll talk more about the specific skills we're going to focus on for Unit 4. So taking a quick look at week 12. So after our reverse outline, then we'll discuss reading 7, and that's all in preparation then for essay 4, the final essay. And then on Friday, our usual routine, the usual cycle of reading quizzes, we'll have the quiz over the 7th reading. And then by the end of the day, Sunday, you are going to upload your final draft of essay 3, which is definitely going to be your strongest essay, right? Okay, and so our activity that we're doing for today helps to guarantee that that is going to be the case. All right, so let's pull that up. Okay, so today in particular, we're going to focus on brainstorming some more for essay 3, really breaking down the prompt to develop a really specific and complex, I guess will be our word, response to the question of the prompt. And to get us started, then let's reflect for a moment. So from what I've been hearing in our weekly group meetings so far, the prompt for essay 3 seems to be more challenging than our previous prompts. And so I just want you to take comfort in the fact that that's actually part of the plan, right? So it's not just you, so no worries. So the kind of rationale behind the kind of challenge that the prompt for essay 3 poses is it's setting you up for the kind of work you're going to be asked to do in XPOS. And in most cases in XPOS, you're going to be asked to bring articles together that seem to have absolutely nothing in common, right? They're not going to seem at all related. And essay 3 then is good practice for that. Okay, so today then we're going to work together to help address what we found to be the most challenging about the prompt. And doing so will help us then kind of brainstorm strategies that we can take with us into XPOS when we face these kinds of challenging prompts that ask us to make a connection between articles that's not a direct or an obvious connection. Okay, and so our first interaction for our play, pause, it, bulb here. So what was the most challenging part of responding to the prompt for essay 3? So we'll pause so you can respond to that. Okay, I look forward to reading your responses and getting a clear sense of what your experience was like in drafting Essay 3. And so I've gone ahead and generated a list of goals here for our session together today, kind of anticipating what I imagine were perhaps the most challenging moments in the process of drafting. And so our goals for today, so we're really going to break again, we're going to break down the prompt for essay 3, as we mentioned. And so we're going to think about the particular work that the prompt is asking us to do. And what work do we have to do before we can answer the question the prompt poses? And getting into the habit of figuring out exactly what work a prompt is asking you to do is definitely a good strategy you want to take forward with you into XPOS. And that's really going to be the focus for us for units 3 and 4, thinking about the skills we're developing. Which ones are we going to take with us into XPOS to help us meet those kinds of challenges? And then also, of course, into our other classes at Rutgers. Okay, and second goal here. So we're going to break down what the first key term of the prompt means. Okay, so high American style. And that's one of the most challenging key terms, I would say, in Vargar. And so to break that down, we're going to analyze the key passage in which Vargar uses this term. Okay, and then we're going to brainstorm how high American style relates to the second key term or key concept of the prompt, that notion of poverty serving as a trap, which comes from the Aaron Reich article. Okay, and identifying this relationship is key to developing a successful response to the prompt. Okay, and so I think there are two major challenges there: is figuring out what does she mean by high American style, and what is the belief system that underlies that, right? And then thinking of how high American style links to this notion of poverty serving as a trap. Okay, and as we work toward those goals, the skills we're going to be practicing and fine tuning are analyzing, close reading, and synthesizing the text, right? Forming those connections between them. Okay, so for our prompts, then, just as a refresher, so how might the belief system underlying Vargar's notion of high American style help to explain why poverty has become, for many people, a trap? Okay, so before we can answer this question, we must first figure out, again, what set of beliefs or values inform this notion of high American style. And again, I think that's one of the challenges of the prompt, and also the challenge of question 4 from the synthesis quiz, right? That was helping to prepare you for this prompt. So again, high American style is a key term she uses only once. And so we have to kind of think of, how the rest of her argument ties in with this concept of high American style. And in the particular passage in which she uses it, how is she defining it and indicating to us what beliefs and values come along with this style? Okay, so in this sense, the prompt is similar to our essay 2 prompt. So remember back when you were asked then to work with Ronson's notion of a surveillance society. And even though he only mentions that key term once for the end of his article, we discovered that it actually informs his entire argument, right? It's a really central concept. And so while online shaming is the key term that he uses the most, the prompt asks us to figure out how online shaming was related to this notion of surveillance society. And this is exactly the kind of work that our new prompt is asking us to do. So how does this notion of high American style, which again, Vargar mentions only once, and also like Ronson toward the end of the article, so how does that relate to her main key terms and topics? For example, discipline, regimen, etc. Right? So we always want to kind of think of those main concepts and key terms from each of the texts and how those concepts might come together, right? How they might relate to one another and help us forge a connection between the two texts. Okay, so to respond to these questions and to the prompt as a whole, we of course must reread the text, right? So just re-emphasizing that point we've been emphasizing since the beginning of the semester. So to understand a difficult concept like high American style, as Vargar uses it, we have to go back and reread and reread and reread it. And anytime you're making connections between texts, you go back and you reread one text with the other text in mind and then reverse that process, right? And so an article is going to read differently when you read it with another text in mind, right? So constantly rereading, rereading, rereading. And once we do that, we want to really home in on the passage in which Vargar uses the phrase high American style. And so I've copy and pasted that passage here for us to work with. So don't we all have friends who are fanatical about skincare and don't really whispers have great skin? How can that be? It's simple. The end product of a skincare regimen isn't perfect skin, but the regimen itself. Something that, in high American style, you have to steadily escalate over time lest you stagnate. Don't you want to improve? Okay, so based on this passage, what can you tell about the beliefs and values that people hold who are willing to, quote unquote, steadily escalate their skincare regimen, even if that means spending more and more money and doing more and more damage to one's skin, and even if that means never attaining perfect skin? Because as Vargar mentions, or emphasizes rather, right, perfect skin is not an attainable goal. And conversely, what can we tell about what people who conform to high American style fear? So I think that question about fear is going to help us actually clarify what the belief system is. And we'll come back to that later in these slides. Okay, so let's analyze the most idea rich portion of this passage, right? And so that's always the key, going in and finding the important passages, and then as you're drafting, thinking of which, sentence or two or chunk of quotation is the most important, the most idea rich, and that will be the portion that you bring in and incorporate into your body paragraphs. Okay, and so just as a reminder, so what does it mean to analyze, right? So remember that to analyze means to break a whole, right? Like an article, a passage, a quotation, to break a whole down into its parts and to examine how these parts relate to one another and how they work together to create the whole. So when we analyze a quotation, then we are breaking it down into its parts, and parts in this context would mean words, phrases, concepts, and examine how these parts work together to generate the overall meaning of the quotation or the article or the portion of a quotation that we're working with. With this definition in mind, let's isolate what we think is the most idea-rich portion of the passage. So again, we want to limit our quotations, mostly speaking, to 1 to 2 sentences at a time, right? And so that'll force us to kind of home in on the most important chunks of that and to work closely with it, right? If we plop a bunch of quotation onto the page, then there's no way we can close read and analyze and work with all of that language. So we're going to pare it down. Okay, so this brings us to our second interaction. So choose what you feel are the most important 1 to 2 sentences from this passage. Okay, so the second half would seem to be the most idea rich portion. So the end product of a skincare regimen isn't perfect skin, but the regimen itself. Something that in high American style, so of course it has our key term from the prompt, right? You have to steadily escalate over time lest you stagnate. Don't you want to improve? Okay, so from this most idea rich portion of the passage, then we want to further break it down, further analyze, and identify the most important words in this section of the passage. So for now, let's go ahead and cross out high American style, right? That's in the prompt. And that's in the question we're asking ourselves, right? What belief system underlies high American style? And so we can't use high American style to define high American style. So we can cross that off. And also the term skincare, which is too specific. So we want to figure out the wider set of beliefs that make people perform regimens like the new skincare rather than focus on this new regimen itself, right? So in our discussions of Varger, we focused on how, of course, the article is about skincare, but it's also about more than skincare, right? There's a larger argument being made here. Okay, so we cross those off. And that brings us to interaction 3. So based on what's left of the quotation, what would you say are the 4 to 5 most important words? Okay, so I went ahead and highlighted what I was anticipating you would respond to. So product, regimen, perfect, escalate, stagnate, and improve. Okay, so interaction 4. Based on these highlighted words, what would you say is the ultimate goal of people who undertake the kinds of extreme regimens we see in Varger's article? If the ultimate goal is not perfection, as she indicates, quote, the end product of a skincare regimen isn't perfect skin, what is it? Okay, so coming back to our question here. And as we'll notice here with question 4, I went ahead and blocked out perfect as well, right? So if she's indicating to us that the kind of goal, right, isn't perfect skin, then we can take that out of our options. Okay, so interaction 5. And based on these highlighted words, the ones we have left, so what would you say that people who undertake such extreme regimens fear? Right? So what's the goal and also what's the fear that underlies high American style? Okay, so what is the ultimate goal and the ultimate fear here? And as we've been doing brainstorming for our close readings, let's turn to some dictionary definitions. Okay, and indeed, our first most important word from that chunk of quotation, offers us a really nice opportunity to close read. And as we've discussed, a productive strategy for forming questions that will generate close readings as a response, we can ask ourselves why a writer has made a particular choice. For example, a particular word choice. So our close reading question in the phrase, the end product of a skincare regimen, why do you think Vargar chose to use the word product rather than the word result, which would have meant essentially the same thing? And that will be interaction 6. Okay, so we'll turn then to the dictionary definitions of product to help us respond to the question. So, one definition, and I pulled this from Oxford Languages, a thing or person that is the result of an action or process. Okay, and the second one, so something that is marketed or sold as a commodity. That's from Merriam Webster. Okay, so interaction 7, which of these two definitions functions as the primary meaning of product as Vargar uses it in the phrase end product in the quotation above? Okay, so our primary meaning here would be A, right? So a thing or person that is the result of an action or process. Okay, so in other words, the end product is another way of saying the end result. So as we can see, the word result, right, appears in the definition of product. And so that's an indication it's the primary meaning. It's the meaning that applies to the way in which Varga is using it here. Okay, and so the end product, in other words, result of a skincare regimen isn't perfect skin. Right. And so, in an article in which the author emphasizes that the new skincare regimen costs quite a bit of money, right? People are shelling out $100 for a little tiny serum. Then we might say the secondary meaning, what we might refer to as the secondary meaning, is B. Okay, so now let's develop a close reading sentence that answers the question at the top of the slide by working with both the primary and secondary meanings of the word product. And when we do so, we want to make sure that we use one of our close reading verbs. To review, what are some of our close reading verbs? And list at least 3. The ones that came to mind for me: implies, suggests, emphasizes, reveals. And of course, there are many close reading verbs we could use, and these are some of the most common. With those close reading verbs in mind, then, we now want to develop our close reading sentence that answers the question here at the top of the slide. Okay, so again, there's no one right close reading sentence that could come out of this analysis and this brainstorming that we've done with these dictionary definitions of the word product. So here's just a sample one. So by using the word product, Vargar suggests that the end result of the new skincare regimen is not perfect skin, but instead getting people to buy as many commodities marketed by the skincare industry as possible. Okay, so let's analyze how we've constructed this close reading sentence. Let's break it down, in other words. By using the word product, again, she suggests the end result is not perfect skin, but buying a bunch of stuff. Okay, so if we start at the beginning, so by using the word product, okay, so what is the term we've been using to refer to when we pull out a word or a phrase from an original quotation in order to work with it in our body paragraph, right? In order to engage it, to close read, to use it to forge a connection to another text. So, what one word have we been using to refer to that process? Okay, right. So, requote. So at the beginning of our close reading sentence, by using the word product, so we've requoted the word product out of the original quotation. And to continue the sentence, Vargar suggests one of our close reading verbs that the end result, okay, interaction 11. So is this phrase, the end result, working with the primary or secondary meaning of the word product? Right, so the primary meaning, end result, end product. Okay, to continue, of the new skincare regimen is not perfect skin. Okay, so what are we working with here? We're working with the original quotation, part of the language there. This idea of the regimen and not having, or perfect skin not being the goal here. Okay, but instead, getting people to buy as many commodities marketed by the skincare industry as possible. So, interaction 12 is this part of the sentence here working with the primary or secondary meaning of the word product. Okay, right here, we're working with the secondary meaning. Okay, and when we're working with that secondary meaning, we can think of the secondary meaning as the relevant associations or connotations that a word has. and really kind of digging into exploring, finding what that secondary meaning, those associations, those connotations are, is how you're going to develop your close reading, right? So digging into that, you're going to find what's implied, what's suggested. In other words, what's not explicitly or directly stated. Okay, great. So this brings us back now to the question of how the word product, as well as the other words that we pulled out or requoted from the quotation from Varga, so regimen, escalate, stagnate, improve, help us to identify the ultimate goal and also fear of those who conform to high American style. And that is where we will pick up in the next video. So we'll take a break here. And so this is the end of part 1. I'll see you in the next video.